A tiny voice cracked through the mansion's silence. Food hurts. In a glass and marble estate overlooking Boston, 2-year-old Evan had stopped eating 9 long days of untouched bowls, trembling hands and cheeks that seemed to sink in overnight. The doctors ran tests. The specialists blamed behavior. But Lena, the new black housemaid, only 3 weeks on the job, saw something no scan could catch. Evan wasn't sick, he was terrified. Lena watched him freeze at certain footsteps, his eyes darting to the doorway like he was bracing for impact. Then the man appeared, Mr. Hawthorne, the family's longtime butler, polished and smiling after 15 years of loyal service. Evan's body went rigid, his knuckles whitening on the high-chair tray. When Hawthorne left, Evan finally whispered again, barely audible. Hurts. Not his stomach, not a fever, the food. The food hurt. With no proof and everything to lose, Lena made a choice. She dumped the untouched breakfast, locked the nursery door, and brought in sealed, untouched groceries, safe food no one else had handled. Still, Evan stared at it like poison. So Lena did something no doctor prescribed. She sliced open a fresh lemon, squeezed 1 clear drop onto her fingertip, tasted it first, and made an exaggerated sour face. Evan blinked curiosity, the first spark in days. He leaned forward, tasted, flinched, swallowed. 1 drop became 2, then a strawberry, then water. Evan ate small bites, but real. And in that locked room, Lena finally understood the truth. The danger wasn't Evan's body. It was the trusted smile walking the halls. Now she just had to prove it before fear stole Evan again. If you want, I can write a second paragraph continuation that sets up the trap and the twist, still within the same tone. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay on her narrow bed beneath the attic eaves, staring at the ceiling while the house breathed around her, pipes ticking floors, whispering distant doors, closing like secrets being locked away. She had worked in wealthy homes before, but this place felt different. Too quiet, too careful. And somewhere inside it, a child had learned that silence was safer than hunger. In the morning, Lena returned to the nursery before anyone else. Evan was awake, sitting up in his crib, clutching a threadbare stuffed rabbit. When he saw her, his eyes softened, not with joy, but with recognition. Trust. That fragile thing he'd nearly lost. Lena lifted him gently, surprised again by how light he felt, like holding fear instead of a child. She promised him in a whisper, "I'm here. I see you." Downstairs, the routine continued as if nothing was wrong. Mrs. Cole Evans' mother moved through the kitchen on autopilot phone, pressed to her ear schedules and meetings stacking up like armor against panic. And then there was Mr. Hawthorne gliding in with a silver tray and that same practiced smile. "Good morning, young master," he said warmly. Evan shrank. Lena felt it in her bones before she saw it in his body, the flinch, the breath held too long. Lena stepped between them without thinking. "I've got him today," she said softly, steady as stone. Hawthorne's smile never wavered, but his eyes cooled, measuring her. "Of course," he replied. "Whatever helps." When he left, the air felt lighter, like a door had opened somewhere unseen. That was when Lena understood her place in this story. She wasn't here to scrub floors or follow orders. She was here because Evan needed someone who would pay attention, someone who would notice fear where others saw inconvenience. She had no badge, no authority, no protection, just instinct memory and a stubborn refusal to look away. Holding Evan close, Lena made a quiet vow not to the family, not to the house, but to the child, whose heartbeat she felt against her chest. "They may not believe me yet," she thought, "but I will not let him disappear." And for the first time since she'd arrived, Lena wasn't afraid of losing her job. She was afraid of what would happen if she didn't act. It happened in a single, unmistakable moment. Lena was kneeling on the nursery floor, rolling a wooden block back and forth with Evan, when his eyes suddenly slid past her shoulder. The color drained from his face. His small body stiffened, as if a switch had been flipped inside him. Lena followed his gaze to the doorway. Mr. Hawthorne stood there, immaculate as ever. Silver hair combed back, dark suit pressed to perfection. One hand resting lightly on the doorframe. "Medication time," he said pleasantly, as if announcing tea. His voice was smooth, familiar, trusted. Evan's breath hitched. His fingers clawed at Lena's sleeve, desperate, silent. His knees pulled tight to his chest, a posture no 2-year-old should know. This wasn't shyness. This wasn't fussiness. This was fear learned the hard way. Lena felt it then, a cold, certain clarity settling in her chest. When Hawthorne stepped forward, Lena moved without thinking, placing herself between him and the child. "I'll handle it," she said, keeping her tone respectful, neutral. Hawthorne paused. Just for a fraction of a second. His smile stayed in place, but something behind his eyes shuddered like a light turned off. "Very well," he replied. "I'll inform Mrs. Cole." His footsteps faded down the hall. Only then did Evan break. Silent tears slid down his cheeks as his body shook. Lena crouched low, bringing her face to his level. "It's okay," she whispered. "He's gone." Evan didn't relax right away. He stared at the door long after it was empty, as if expecting danger to return. "It's him, isn't it?" Lena asked softly. "The man in the suit." Evan hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Lena's heart cracked open. She understood the impossible truth now. Whatever had happened, it lived in the space between food and fear, delivered by the same trusted hands. A child this young didn't invent terror. Someone had taught it to him. And in that moment, Lena realized the hardest part wasn't proving the truth. It was surviving long enough to protect it. Lena didn't rush to accuse. Accusations without proof were weapons that cut the wrong hands first. Instead, she stayed on the nursery floor with Evan holding him, while his small body slowly stopped shaking. When his breathing steadied, he whispered again the words thin, but clear enough to shatter her heart. "Food hurts." Lena swallowed hard. "The food hurts you?" she asked gently. Evan nodded, then pointed toward the empty tray on the table. His face tightened like he was bracing for pain that hadn't even come yet. This wasn't imagination. This was memory, his body remembering something his mouth couldn't explain. Lena stood her movements, careful, controlled. She lifted the untouched bowl and studied it like it might speak back. Plain oatmeal, nothing strange, nothing visible. But poison didn't announce itself. It hid. It waited. And suddenly every detail lined up with terrifying clarity. Who prepared the meals, who delivered them, who had access when no one else was watching. She wrapped the food in a napkin and slipped it into her pocket. Her heart pounding. Not evidence yet, but a beginning. When she turned back, Evan was watching her closely. She knelt in front of him again. "I believe you," she said quietly, "and I won't let it hurt you anymore." For the first time, Evan reached for her. His tiny fingers closed around hers with surprising strength, as if he understood that something important had just changed. Lena felt the weight of that trust settle onto her shoulders, heavy, terrifying, sacred. Downstairs, the house moved on as usual. Polished shoes crossed marble floors. Soft voices carried polite lies. Somewhere behind a familiar smile, someone believed they were winning. Lena knew better now. She had seen fear where others saw obedience. She had heard truth in a whisper no one else was listening for. That night, as rain streaked the windows and the mansion glowed with false safety, Lena made a decision that would cost her sleep, her job, and possibly her life. She would not confront. She would not run. She would watch. She would wait. And when the moment came, she would act, because a child had trusted her with the truth. And that truth demanded protection, no matter the price. Lena locked the nursery door and leaned her back against it, her heart pounding so hard she was afraid Evan could hear it. The house was still too still, like it was holding its breath. She knelt beside him and spoke softly, steadying herself as much as him. "No one else is coming in here," she promised. "Not today." She pulled a small canvas bag from her pocket and set it on the floor. Inside were simple things she had brought herself that morning: sealed crackers, bottled water fruit still wrapped in plastic. Food no one else had touched. She placed them gently in front of Evan, his eyes filled with panic. He shook his head hard, curling into himself. Even now, even when danger was gone, his body remembered. "It's okay," Lena whispered. "I won't make you." She sat cross-legged on the floor, keeping her hands in plain sight. She opened the water bottle, took a sip. Opened the crackers, ate one slowly. Evan watched every movement tense, waiting for pain that didn't come. Still, he didn't reach. Then Lena remembered something from long before this house. Her nephew as a baby, afraid of new foods. How trust had to start smaller than hunger. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a single lemon she'd taken from the kitchen days earlier, its skin unbroken, untouched. She held it up so Evan could see. "This comes from inside," she said softly. "Nobody can hide anything in it." She sliced it open with a clean knife. The sharp, bright scent filled the room. Evan's nose wrinkled despite himself. Lena smiled gently. "It's sour," she said. "I'll show you." She dipped her finger into the juice, tasted it, and made an exaggerated face. Very sour. For the first time in days, Evan's lips twitched. Curiosity flickered through the fear. "One tiny drop," Lena said, holding out her finger. "That's all." Evan hesitated. His whole body trembled. Then slowly, bravely, he leaned forward and touched his tongue to her finger. His face scrunched up immediately. Lena held her breath. He swallowed. Her chest tightened. "You did it," she whispered, tears spilling freely now. "You're so brave." She offered another drop. This time Evan leaned in faster, then another, then a tiny piece of strawberry, then a sip of water. Evan ate, not much, not fast, but enough to prove something vital: the fear could be broken. The pain wasn't inside him, it had been put there. Lena pulled him into her arms, rocking gently as his small body relaxed against hers. In that moment, Lena understood exactly what she had done. She hadn't just fed a child. She had taken the first step toward exposing a truth someone had worked very hard to bury, and she knew there was no turning back now. The truth didn't reveal itself all at once. It crept out in fragments late at night behind locked doors in places Lena was never meant to enter. She waited until the house slept. With Evan finally resting, Lena slipped into the dim hallway, her bare feet silent against the cold marble. Her pulse roared in her ears as she reached the staff wing. Mr. Hawthorne's door stood slightly ajar, as if daring her to look. She hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The room was immaculate. Too immaculate. Drawers aligned, bed corners sharp enough to cut. She opened the desk, then another drawer, and froze. Receipts. Names of substances she didn't recognize. Medical suppliers that didn't sell vitamins. Beneath them, folded papers, old legal documents, a family tree traced in careful ink. Lena's breath caught as the connections snapped into place. Hawthorne wasn't just a servant. He was tied to the family's past, to money, to inheritance. Behind her, the floor creaked. "You shouldn't be here." Lena spun around. Hawthorne stood in the doorway, his voice calm, almost disappointed. The mask was gone now. No warmth. No pretense. "You're hurting him," Lena said, her voice shaking but loud enough to stand on. "You're poisoning a child." Hawthorne sighed, as if correcting a misunderstanding. "Such an ugly word," he replied. "I prefer necessary." He stepped closer. If the boy fades quietly, no one asks questions. Children do that sometimes. Tragic. Unavoidable. Lena's stomach turned. He's two. He's in the way, Hawthorne said simply. And you, his eyes narrowed, are becoming a problem. She reached for her phone, but he noticed. Careful, he warned softly. You're new here. You have access. If this becomes public, who do you think they'll believe? He leaned in just enough for his words to land like a blade. Leave tonight. Walk away. Or accidents start happening. Fear surged through her, hot and paralyzing. For the first time since she arrived, Lena understood the depth of the danger, not just to Evan, but to herself, to anyone she loved. Hawthorne knew it too. He straightened his jacket, all composure restored. Think wisely, he said, opening the door. Some lives are cheaper than others. Lena ran. She locked herself in the nursery, scooped Evan into her arms, and held him, while her whole body shook. The house felt different now, hostile watching. She was trapped between silence and death. But as Evan's small hand touched her cheek, she felt something stronger than fear rise inside her. If she couldn't accuse him, she would outthink him. And if the truth couldn't be spoken safely, then it would have to be caught. Lena didn't confront Mr. Hawthorne again, not right away. Instead, she did something far more dangerous. She told the truth. That night, she sat across from Mrs. Cole and her husband in the quiet study. Her hands clenched so tightly her fingers ached. The words came out slowly at first. Then all at once, Evan's fear, the food, the lemon, the documents, the threat. When she finished, the room felt hollowed out, as if the air itself had been pulled away. That's impossible, Mr. Cole said, standing abruptly. Hawthorne has been with us for 15 years. I know, Lena replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. That's why he thought no one would see him. Silence stretched. Mrs. Cole hadn't moved. Her face had gone pale, her eyes fixed on a single truth Lena hadn't said aloud yet. My son only eats when he's not near him, she whispered. And the moment you took over, he lived. That was enough. The plan was simple and terrifying. Lena would pretend to leave bags packed goodbye, said. Hawthorne would think he'd won. Cameras would be installed quietly hidden in the nursery and hallway. They would wait. The next afternoon, Lena walked out the front door with her suitcase, never once looking back. Her heart broke when Evan cried from the nursery window, but she kept walking. 10 minutes later, she slipped back inside through the service entrance, joining the Coles in a locked room, eyes fixed on the live feed. They didn't have to wait long. Hawthorne entered the nursery with practiced ease, carrying a cup. His voice was gentle, soothing. Just us again, young master. Evan recoiled, crawling backward until he hit the wall. On screen, Hawthorne's hand tilted the cup. This will help you sleep, Mrs. Cole screamed. The door burst open. Get away from my son! Cameras caught everything, the bottle. The words, the moment Hawthorne's calm cracked. Police were already on their way. When they arrived, Hawthorne didn't run. He simply stared at the evidence playing back on the screen, his silence louder than any confession. Evan was pulled into his mother's arms, sobbing. Lena stepped forward, and Evan reached for her without hesitation. She took him, holding him close as the house finally exhaled. The trap had closed, and for the first time since Lena arrived, the truth stood in the open, undeniable, and impossible to bury again. The months that followed were loud in all the ways trauma always is: courtrooms, questions, cameras, names printed, where Evan's pain had once lived in silence. Mr. Hawthorne was convicted, his careful patience exposed for what it was: cruelty disguised as loyalty. But justice, Lena learned, didn't arrive with a single clean ending. It came slowly, unevenly, in small mercies that mattered more than headlines ever could. Evan healed first, not all at once, not magically, but steadily. His appetite returned in shy steps. Half a banana, A few crackers, a cup of water held with both hands. His cheeks filled out. His laughter came back like a sound he'd misplaced and finally found under the couch. He ran now, unafraid of footsteps. He slept through the night. He trusted food again. And when he wanted comfort, he reached for Lena without hesitation, as if his heart had already decided where safety lived. The house changed too. Mrs. Cole canceled meetings. Mr. Cole came home early. They learned the weight of presence, the cost of absence. They sat on the floor with their son and watched him stack blocks and knock them down again and again just to prove the world could fall and still be rebuilt. Guilt lingered, but it softened into gratitude, into action. Lena never left. At first she stayed because Evan asked for her, then because the family asked her, and finally because it felt like home. She became Evan's official nanny, then something closer, something that didn't need a title. On quiet afternoons, they sat in the garden where sunlight filtered through leaves, and Evan asked questions only children ask, simple, honest, unafraid. "Why lemon?" he asked once, sipping his favorite drink. Lena smiled. "Because it was pure," she said. "Because no one could hide anything in it." A year later, in a small courtroom filled with quiet smiles, Lena stood beside Evan as a judge approved her as his legal godmother. Evan clapped and announced it to the room like a victory he'd planned himself. "She's my safe person," he said proudly. Lena felt tears rise not from fear this time, but from something warmer, something earned. She thought back to the beginning, to a locked nursery, to one trembling child, to a single drop of lemon juice, and a choice made without guarantees. Sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I see you." And sometimes that is enough to save a life. The story didn't end with a verdict or a headline. It ended quietly, the way real healing often does. On a warm afternoon, Evan sat on the grass with sticky fingers and bright eyes laughing as lemonade dripped down his wrist. The same child who once flinched at footsteps now ran toward them, fearless, alive, whole. Lena watched him from the porch, sunlight on her face, thinking about how close the world had come to losing him and how easily it could have looked away. What saved Evan wasn't wealth or power or the best doctor's money could buy. It was attention. It was someone noticing that a child's silence meant pain. Someone brave enough to trust instinct when logic failed. Someone willing to risk comfort, reputation, even safety to protect a voice too small to fight back. One woman. One choice. One moment of courage that changed everything. Lena never called herself a hero. But Evan did. And sometimes that's enough. Because the truth is this, children don't stop eating for no reason. People don't withdraw without cause. Pain almost always whispers before it screams. And too often, the world is too busy to listen. Real courage isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly in empathy, in attention, in the decision to act, when it would be easier to stay silent. The smallest actions done with love and integrity can save lives. Never underestimate the power of seeing someone fully, especially when everyone else looks away. Now we want to hear from you. If you were in Lena's place, would you have spoken up even knowing the risk? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful human stories where one brave choice changes everything.